The glow of the security lights flickered in intervals, illuminating a sea of parked cars and drunk gamblers stumbling home after a long night at the tables. Somewhere in that blur of movement and metallic shine, 27-year-old Christie Wilson was caught on surveillance footage walking beside a tall, older man in a dark jacket. The man's face was partially obscured in the grainy image. His gait relaxed, his posture confident. Christie, athletic and pretty, moved slightly ahead of him, as if leading the way or perhaps resisting it. And then nothing. The casino's parking lot cameras rotated every 3 minutes and 40 seconds. In that brief sweep of time, Christie vanished. When the camera turned back, she was gone. Her purse was later found inside the casino. Her car remained untouched in the lot. It was as if she had been swallowed by the shadows. By sunrise, Christie's phone had gone silent. Her voicemail box was full. And her mother, Debbie Boyd, felt it deep in her bones. Something was terribly wrong. Christie Wilson had always been full of life, sharp, outgoing and athletic. She played soccer in college and recently landed a successful job in Silicon Valley. Friends and family adored her. She was the kind of woman who lit up every room she entered. That evening, she had gone to Thunder Valley Casino for a spontaneous night of blackjack. She had mentioned it casually in a call to her boyfriend earlier that day. Nothing seemed unusual, just a night out to blow off some steam. She didn't say who she was going with, and no one knew about the man in the dark jacket until they saw him on the footage days later. When Christie didn't show up to work the next morning, alarms began to go off. Debbie tried calling, texting, reaching out to friends. Nothing. Pat, Christie's stepfather, called the police. A missing persons report was filed, but without evidence of foul play, the urgency didn't immediately register. Still, Debbie and Pat refused to wait. They drove straight to the casino, walked through the parking lot, called out her name into the echoing night, and started handing out flyers. Debbie couldn't eat. Pat didn't sleep. It wasn't just that their daughter was missing. It was the cold feeling that she wasn't coming back. When investigators finally reviewed the surveillance footage, their eyes locked on the man next to Christie. He was later identified as Mario Garcia, a 53-year-old father of 2 with a successful engineering career. He was married, clean-cut, respectable. But as detectives dug deeper, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Garcia had met Christie at a blackjack table that night. They struck up a conversation, and later, witnesses remembered seeing the two chatting animatedly. Some recalled Christie being uncomfortable at times, possibly trying to distance herself. One dealer later testified that Garcia seemed possessive, inching closer to her as the night wore on. When questioned, Garcia claimed they had parted ways in the parking lot. He said Christie got into her car and drove off on her own. But there was one glaring problem with his story. Christie's car never moved an inch. She never made it home. Never called her boyfriend. Never answered her phone again. The lie was unmistakable. Search teams combed the area surrounding the casino. Helicopters scouted from above. Dogs were brought in. Volunteers walked through brush and ravines, calling Christie's name. Still nothing. As Garcia's inconsistencies mounted, detectives turned their attention toward his home. A search warrant revealed scratches on his face and forearms. He claimed they were from yard work. But forensic testing on the interior of his car told another story. Blood. Small amounts of Christie Wilson's blood were found on the inside of Garcia's vehicle. It was enough to arrest him, even without a body. Debbie and Pat were devastated. They had prayed for a miracle, hoped she'd been taken but still alive, hidden somewhere waiting to be rescued. But as days turned to weeks, hope turned to mourning. They clung to each other, to memories, to old voicemails Christie had left on their answering machine. Debbie couldn't stop replaying her daughter's laugh. Still, they refused to give up completely. Not until Christie was found, and Garcia was held accountable. The prosecution knew the odds were stacked against them. Convicting someone of murder without a body is one of the hardest feats in criminal justice. There's no cause of death, no crime scene, no weapon, just fragments of evidence, timelines, and instinct. But they had a suspect who was lying. A man with visible injuries, inconsistent statements, and, most damning of all, Christie's blood in his car. The prosecutor leaned heavily on the surveillance footage, the witness accounts of Garcia's behavior that night, and expert testimony about the blood found in the vehicle. Still, Garcia insisted he was innocent. His lawyers claimed Christie might have left on her own, that someone else could have harmed her after she exited the casino. But that story didn't explain the blood. It didn't explain why he lied about her leaving in her car. And it didn't explain why he refused to help in the search. Debbie Boyd took the stand, her voice trembling. She described the last time she saw her daughter. The laugh, the hug, the promise to talk again soon. The courtroom was silent as she choked back tears. Her pain became the emotional center of the trial. "I know in my heart she didn't just walk away," she said. "She loved her life. She loved us. And she would never have left without saying goodbye." Outside the courtroom, Debbie and Pat became tireless advocates, not just for Christie, but for every family whose loved ones vanish into the unknown. They organized searches, pleaded with the media, and urged the public to come forward with any detail, no matter how small. In the evenings, Debbie sat alone in Christie's old room, flipping through childhood photos, the air thick with her daughter's lingering scent. Pat built a website in her honor, listing updates, tips, and a hotline for anonymous leads. Their lives no longer revolved around work or hobbies. Every waking moment was spent in pursuit of one thing: truth. Reporters followed the case closely. It was rare. No body, but such damning circumstantial evidence. And in 2007, after 2 agonizing years, a jury delivered its verdict. Mario Garcia was guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs. Debbie clutched Pat's hand. They had finally gotten justice, or at least part of it. But still, no one knew where Christie was. And Garcia refused to say a word. He never confessed, never expressed remorse, never revealed where her body was left. He stared ahead as the judge sentenced him to 59 years to life in prison. But for Christie's parents, the punishment wasn't enough. Years passed. Life moved forward, but only for everyone else. For Debbie, every birthday, every holiday, was a reminder of what had been stolen. There was no grave to visit. No urn on the mantel. Just a cold question echoing through the walls of her home. "Where is my daughter?" Pat developed insomnia. He stopped celebrating milestones. He said nothing to friends who asked how they were doing, because how do you explain that your daughter was erased and no one knows where she rests? They turned to billboards, podcasts, any platform that would help keep Christie's name alive. Debbie wrote letters to Garcia in prison. Some begged for the truth. Others cursed him. None were answered. In 2015, a full decade after Christie's disappearance, Debbie sat in front of the local news camera again, holding her daughter's picture. Her voice was tired, but her words were sharp. "We know you did it. You've been convicted. But you still get to wake up and breathe. You still get to talk to your kids. We have nothing. And until you tell us where she is, your soul will rot in that cell." That same year, Debbie joined forces with victims' families from across California. They pushed for a bill that would offer reduced prison time to convicted killers if they revealed the location of their victims. It was controversial, but Debbie believed it could bring answers to countless grieving families. They called it Christie's Law. And though it stalled in the legislature, it sparked a nationwide conversation about victim rights and post-conviction bargaining. Pat quietly updated Christie's memorial website. On the front page, he added her favorite quote: No one is actually dead until the ripples they cause in the world die away. And Christie had left many ripples. Former classmates organized awareness walks in her name. Her old high school dedicated a scholarship to young women pursuing careers in justice and criminology. Even strangers reached out to Debbie, saying Christie's story had inspired them to cherish their loved ones more deeply. Nearly 15 years after Christie Wilson disappeared, the walls finally cracked. In August 2020, a new team of investigators, now with decades of data advancements in ground-penetrating technology, and a renewed push from Christie's family, approached Mario Garcia again, this time with an offer. He was now older, his health declining. Facing the rest of his life behind bars, they presented him with a final chance. Reveal Christie's location, and they'd consider a formal statement to the parole board for limited leniency. Not freedom, just a sliver of dignity. This time, Garcia didn't reject them outright. He asked for time. And 1 week later, in a closed-door confession, he finally spoke the words Debbie and Pat had longed to hear. He led authorities to a rural property once owned by his family, deep in the Sierra Nevada foothills, overgrown with weeds and thyme. There, beneath a mound near the base of a twisted oak tree, they unearthed human remains. Dental records confirmed what the family already knew in their hearts. It was Christie. The news broke Debbie. She sobbed so hard she collapsed in the living room. Pat stood silently for 10 minutes, staring out the window. But their tears weren't just grief. They were release. Now they could finally bring her home. In September 2020, under a pale blue California sky, Christie Wilson was laid to rest in a quiet ceremony attended by family, close friends, and the detectives who had never given up on her case. A soft wind moved through the trees as Debbie placed a single white rose on the casket. "She's not a missing person anymore," she whispered. "She's not a ghost. She's not a rumor. She's my daughter. And now she's finally home." There were no camera crews that day. No reporters. Just silence. After 15 years of chaos, pain, questions, and nightmares, this was the ending Debbie had fought so hard for. Mario Garcia remains behind bars. No additional leniency was ever granted. His confession came too late, and prosecutors made clear. The truth was welcome, but the sentence stood. In the years since, Debbie and Pat have continued their advocacy. They speak at events for missing persons, they comfort parents in the throes of fresh loss, and they tell their story so the world never forgets the cruelty of what was done, or the strength it takes to endure it.